Good evening, everyone. Please forgive me for sitting. I normally wouldn't, but I won't make it through an hour and a half stood up, so I'm going to try and do it from sitting. But thank you all so much for coming, and also a big thank you to Victoria Hall, because it is such a great space, and they've been really, really helpful. So this evening, I am not an expert at local government. In fact, I try my best not to be, because that's not my job. So I'm hoping that I will explain where I think we are in the process in the most normal person terms, because it's not something that I particularly understand either. But essentially my goal is to map out the government's thinking, what we think the implications would be for us, what different stakeholders currently are proposing, and most importantly, I want to hear your views. I'm going to try and keep my bit, keep getting longer, but to about 15-20 minutes, and then essentially I just want to hear your responses. So whatever you feel about it, what you think about it. As I said, I won't have all the all the answers, but I'm hoping you leave here going, okay, I get it. I see what's been proposed, I understand what I think it means. And most of all for me, I'm hoping that I will leave with an idea of your red lines, what you're most worried about, what this means for you, what you want to see happen. I will say things are changing by the day, so we're sat waiting for a letter from government this week, which will tell us whether or not the elections in Leicestershire will be cancelled. Now that may be Leicestershire, but essentially if the elections are cancelled, that means that we've been put on a particular pathway, which if the elections are cancelled, means our process will be moving a lot faster than others around the country. So when I say this is changing on a daily basis, it really isn't. So in terms of what I'm going to try and cover, as I said, what and why, the timeline, the benefits, concerns, who are the decision makers, what's it mean for us, do we have a choice, what next, and your thoughts. So in terms of what the government is proposing, so this is the biggest reforms to local council in the last 50 years. It's major reforms. We all know that local council is where actually people have the most contact with government, and therefore it's the most important touchstone. What they're bound to do is to move away from what we call two-tier governments. So in Leicestershire, that's scrapping Harbour District Council. In Lincolnshire, that's scrapping South Kesteven District Council, Melton Borough Council. But they also want to scrap small unitaries. And that means people like us. And as they do the reorganisation, they don't want to end up with what they call orphan councils. So essentially councils surrounded by mayoralties, and then essentially isolated councils like us. In their place, they want to create these brand new enormous unitaries, which have to have, it gets more complicated, but a minimum of 500,000 people living in them. That was their original goal. In the course of the last 4 weeks, they've negotiated with the Treasury, and the Treasury has said to MHCLG that they're happy for the minimum floor to be 380,000. So it's a big reduction, but that's still a lot more than 41,000 people that we currently have. So as I say, Rutland has 41, South Kesteven currently serves 145,000 residents, and Melton serves 52,000. And the government has said that they will facilitate this programme of two-tier reorganisation for those unitary councils where there is evidence of failure, or where their size or boundaries may be hindering their ability to deliver sustainable and high-quality services for their residents. I'll come on to whether either of those apply to us later. But the be-all and end-all is not local government reorganisation. The be-all and end-all is what they call devolution, which is the next level up. They're not actually particularly interested in the local government reorganisation, that's why it wasn't in their manifesto. But what was is the creation of mayoralties across the country. So essentially the goal is they want to create big strategic authorities where you have one mayor. So probably in the end you're looking at about 10 mayors to cover the whole of England. So we really are looking at mass groups. And these combined authorities, as they often call them, will have enormous powers, particularly when it comes to planning. So essentially we scrap small unitaries, we scrap district councils, and we move that tier of government to essentially sitting above county councils. So you're not necessarily making lots of savings, it's just changing where it sits. So why is the government saying they want to do it? They're saying that the benefits are the decisions we made closer to home. Now what they mean by that is not what we consider closer to home, but as in rather than Whitehall making decisions, taking more powers away from government and parliament, which a lot of people will be in fun of. However, as I say, those decisions could potentially for us be made somewhere like Glenfield, or worst case scenario, be made somewhere like Nottinghamshire for us. We just don't know. So it's not local in terms of open, but these councils will still have all the same responsibilities our current council does. So schooling, transport, adult social care, taxation, children's services, planning, leisure centres, you name it. Now it is true that if you speak to councils across the country, they all want more devolution. But what they mean by devolution is more powers for their council. They don't necessarily mean scrapping to come into mayoralties. So, where we are is that areas who want devolution have to put forward final proposals by March. However, initial proposals have to go in by January the 10th, because they've already got in. So government only wrote to councils in December. So it was an incredibly short timeline for them to put more proposals. But they did write to all councils. So Hertfordshire District Council, Melton Borough Council, they never received a letter asking for their opinion. Leicestershire County Council was asked, as the main unitary in the area, and RCC was asked to give their opinion as a kind of neighbouring potential orphan, but not with equal authority to Leicestershire County Council response. So as I said, in terms of mayoralty, those authorities would be everything from transport to skills to housing, economic development, environment, climate change, health, well-being. And it is true that it would be easier for government to allocate money to regions, because they say, here, Mayor, this is your money for the whole of the East Midlands. But as we say, decision-making rests less with government, more then. So in long term, many competences that will currently be immediate move potentially to Leicestershire, in the end will move to this kind of big metro mayor model. And to be fair, we have seen some successes with it. You know, I'm not sat here saying they haven't worked. Andy Burnham has done a really good job in his area. Andy Street has done a really good job in his area. There are others I won't name, but even next door to us we've got some, and you couldn't tell me the name of the mayor and sitting here, actually I can't remember his name either. You know, there are mayors around the country where they haven't made an impact, they haven't been able to make a difference. So it is a really mixed bag. So essentially we've got two processes taking place at the same time. Now devolution, as I said, is the government's priority, and Leicestershire and Lincolnshire have both applied to be part of the devolution process, and by signing the letter that went to government, Rutland has said they're happy to be part of the devolution process discussions, but RCC did put in a red line, which is that local reorganisation has to be done properly first, and they won't agree to any cost. So as well as decision making, the other kind of praise the government would give the new process would be simple structures. It massively enables housing, so you've got one there making planning for vast areas, and actually the Minister responsible for reorganisation said last week, this agenda is all about tackling housing. It's about exactly that. And that's why areas like Harbour, of course, are so worried about being moved into Leicester City. There should be cost savings, arguably, when this happens, because you have fewer CEOs, fewer senior management teams, less duplication, and ministers frequently quote this report from PwC that you can save billions. But I don't think the maths adds up if you're essentially saying, take away this level, but then create a new level up here, because you're ultimately still going to end up with multiple levels. And I asked the Library in Parliament to give me an assessment of this, and they said that the evidence does not show that there are savings always. Sometimes there are, but actually internationally it shows that when councils merge, there isn't always more money saved, actually better ways for councils to share procurement in different areas. So in terms of where we are, I touched on it very briefly. So we've had the first letter go in by January 10th, where RCC and LCC had to say what their preference was. I'll come back to that in a moment. Then you get to interim proposals by March, which is incredibly soon. Then detailed proposals in May, or if you're lucky, our goal will be to try and push it back to at least autumn. And then essentially they would have devolution deals in place by 2027, and we will be wrapped up by 2028 in our brand new models. So 185 councils moving into new unitary structures by 2028. However, I think that timeline might be slightly optimistic. So who makes the decision? The final decision is made by the Secretary of State, that's Angela Rayner in this situation. No restructure, any change to how we receive and benefit from local government requires the councils to give their consent. So the process they have created not only has not started public consultation, and there is no mechanism for you as the public to support or oppose this until the very, very end, which I'll touch on, but they've essentially said that they will legislate for councils who refuse to get on board or where one council is standing in the way of the restructure. In the past, there's always been public consultations, there's also judicial reviews, all sorts of referendums, but as you saw from the timeline, there isn't one. Now, I've put a written question to government saying, are you going to put funding in? So you can pay for referendums in areas where clearly there's massive public opposition to this, and they haven't responded yet. Now, technically, we've been told, but again, the details aren't there because this has all happened so fast, but there will be a public consultation at the very end of all of this, but it'll be on the mayoralties. It won't be on the local government reorganisation side of things. So you all might get consulted on, would you like to join Massive East Midlands mayoralty, would you like to just join Leicestershire and Rutland mayoralty, but you won't get asked about whether or not you want to leave Rutland and rejoin Leicestershire. So what does it mean for Rutland? So we all about small unitaries. We all know that they consider us an orphan unitary, because everyone else around us has gone into unitaries and then ultimately strategic authorities. And we know that we're expected to join a council with a minimum of 380,000 people in it. And then on top of that, they will put a unitary combined model. So what does that journey look like for us? We have lots and lots of neighbours, we all know that. But Lincolnshire is already wrapped up on the outer deal. Northamptonshire isn't even really a question. Then you've got Cambridgeshire, which is going in with Peterborough, and then of course we've got Leicestershire. So in terms of Leicestershire, that's obviously where we're increasingly subsumed. We thought we would have more choice. In my discussions with Gail Waller, we thought we'd have more choice about what we could put forward as proposals, but they changed the discussion halfway through and said that now, when you form a unitary, they expect you to come on board and be co-located with your current police services, your fire services and health services. So if they, for example, we would suddenly say, well, actually, want to join Lincolnshire, we'd be breaking one of the restrictions they're trying to put in place in terms of how we would do that. One thing I do want to just quash immediately, because a lot of people are worried about this. There is no proposal under which we join Leicester City. That is not on the table and it is not for discussion. Whether in the end as part of a mayoralty, we're part of a Leicestershire mayoralty, that is very possible, but we will not be run from the centre of Leicester for our local council. So, in terms of what those options are available to us, if we look at Leicestershire and Leicester as the model, because that's what we've got to assume at this point, the current proposal that's gone into government is that we want, and forgive the language, a giant donut. So one unitary council for Leicester on its own, because there are about 380,000 people, and then one unitary council for the whole of Leicestershire and Rutland together. And we will be in together. We've got no idea where the headquarters will be, it could be Glenfield. But it's not that simple, because Leicester City has to prove that it has the financial ability to grow over the next few years. It can't be just efficient as it is currently. So Leicester City will expand its borders, and this is one of the things the County Council, Leicestershire County Council, said they were willing to see happen. As you can imagine, my residents in Harborough are up in arms. They are not willing to be subsumed into Leicester City for many, many reasons. However, that should expand to us. So LCC has put forward that proposal. It has been opposed by all 7 district councils in Leicestershire, as well as Rutland County Council, who have written together to the Minister and said, we don't want one giant unitary authority for Leicestershire, it's not going to work for us. So then the question is, if we were to move to having to move into Leicestershire, and it was to be 2 unitaries, should it be Rutland with West and East Leicestershire, or should it be Rutland with split into North and South, or East and West? And there are lots of different arguments at that at the moment, and the district councils have commissioned research with Rutland County Council to try and work out what would make most sense. I think the only red line currently for district councils is that Melton wants to be with Rutland, however it ends up if this happens. I'll go into more of these later, but the key thing, as I've touched on the slides, is that currently we have 27 councillors here representing us as Rutland. If we move into one giant donut, as I'm going to keep referring to it, we will have 3 people representing the whole of Rutland on that council. If we move into 2 unitaries, it's likely we'll have 6. However, there are arguments we can make to try and increase that, which I'll come on to later. So status quo, obviously, is the other option available to us, and then putting forward an alternative, which you may have seen in the Rutland Times. Gail Moore and I have both been working quite hard to see if there's an alternative we can put forward. The problem with an alternative, and knocking on doors during the election, I cannot tell you how many people in Stamford and Stamford Village have said to me, we wish we were Rutland. And I've never spoken about it publicly before because I always thought, if that's what people want in that part of my constituency, I will wait, I'll see if it's ground smell, and then we'll do something about it. Obviously, this is forced the conversation. But unfortunately, no matter how you cut it, and this doesn't mean we shouldn't put it forward as a proposal, the numbers don't get us to 380,000. So if we were to take the whole of SKDC, which is 145,000 people, but that was to take us all the way up to Grantham and Bourne, and then all the way down to Market Deeping, let alone the bits I represent, if we add them all together, we're still plus with Melton as well, we would still be 100,000 short of the target we have to hit. Now, as I said, that doesn't mean we shouldn't put forward an alternative, because we should have a voice in this, or we can say what we think is best for us. But in terms of the sheer numbers, with Vale of Beaver, Melton, SKDC and everything, we end up short. And the additional complexities of this is what does it mean for Melton being obviously in Leicestershire at the moment, what does it mean for SKDC, which is currently part of Lincolnshire, and the same way that we're proud of ourselves and our identity and our pride of place, there's similar feelings. So, if they go ahead with this, will we still be Rutland? I should say at this point the Lord Lieutenant said to give her apologies that she couldn't come, so I will pass that on. So according to government, I spent a lot of time looking into things that I never thought I would understand. Ceremonial counties only exist as counties for purposes of having a Lord Lieutenant. That is the way it's defined in law. We've obviously had a Lord Lieutenant since 1559, and pretty much all the way through, apart from obviously we lost it in 1974. And from a government perspective, ceremonial counties are defined in something called the Lieutenancies Act of 1997. Now, as we all know, in 1974 we lost our Lord Lieutenancy, and with that we lost our ceremonial county status. There are currently no examples in the whole country of multiple ceremonial counties existing under one local government. It just doesn't exist. So I wrote to government, and I did a written question, which essentially means the minister has to respond formally, legally sound, and essentially as if they were at the dispatch box, which happens to be writing. And I said, what are you doing to look at ceremonial counties? What are you going to do to make sure Rutland doesn't lose its independence? And as you can see, their answer says, it won't directly impact the border of a ceremonial county, and then you just pick the bottom in red, but if it does, we'll look at the implications. So my assumption of this is that the government hasn't given any thought yet to what this means for ceremonial counties, but it also tells me they can't promise they'll protect our ceremonial county, which makes sense because of what we all know happened back in 1974. So from that, I went, okay, well, the government's not going to promise me they can protect us, so let's look at the legislative status to see if there's something I can get from that. So as I said, the Lord Lieutenancies Act in 1997 was created before Rutland was a unitary again. So when you open that act up, Rutland is listed as one of the places that has a Lord Lieutenancy, so that's the first problem for me. I have spoken to some experts today who've told me that Section 3B of the Act, which says any other areas in England which wish to have counties, ceremonial county seats, as per the Local Government Act 1972. Now, fine, you can say that according to the 1972 Act, anyone that was a county in 1972 can have it, but it was the 1972 Act that scrapped Rutland as a county council and made us a district. So I'm essentially sat between different legal opinions at the moment, but I need to get to the bottom of it. But the assessment still leaves me with the point that we, as a county, do not have any certainty that we will be able to protect being a ceremonial county. So going back to 1990, when was this quote? It must be 1974. The then Labour government minister gave this answer when they were asked in the chamber about could we just have our ceremonial status please, even if we got to Leicestershire. And as you can say, they said it is not possible because you cannot be a ceremonial county if you do not have your own county council or some sort of council. So, therefore, if Rutland were abolished as a local government area, we would lose our Lord Lieutenancy and therefore we would lose our ceremonial status as Rutland. As you can see why this worries me, and the lack of reassurances is yet worries me as well. But as I said, there are some who are more optimistic than me, so we'll see. So in terms of how we protect our ceremonial status in Rutland, that for me is an absolute red line. It's just something I will fight for, unless you all tell me that I'm mad and you want me to put down my battle axe, in which case I will. But I don't think we should be stripped of our identity. So in terms of the options that we have, ultimately this is all in the hands of the government. They can decide to protect our ceremonial status if they wish to do so, if we are forced to join Leicestershire County Council, and that is something we can campaign for. Option 2, the government is going to have to pass legislation potentially to force us to merge if we refuse to merge, or for all sorts of other reasons, to do elections, for example, postponing things like that. If that happened, I could lay an amendment as your MP that says, I want ceremonial statuses to be protected. Now, I've gone around the country over the last few weeks speaking to MPs of all sorts of political colours. I can't find anyone else, unfortunately, who is looking at this problem, because that was my goal. I can find lots of people who are saying, we're going to lose our ceremonial status if we can work together. If I lay an amendment, I know Conservative MPs will vote for it, I would hope the Democratic MPs will vote for it as well. I don't know what would happen otherwise, and so I'd have to go around begging friends across our political parties like the SNP to vote, even though they don't know any English matters, but it is an option. Then there's option 3, which is essentially in the Lieutenancies Act, there's a sentence that says, Her Majesty may appoint lieutenants for any county or area. Now, area is a bit uninteresting because we wouldn't get a county anymore. So could we ask the King to appoint a lieutenant just for Rutland? Now, the issue with that is it's not a Lord Lieutenant, so I don't know if the lieutenant on its own is enough to confer ceremonial county status, or if we just have someone who's very lovely who gets to go and do ceremonial things, but we lose our county status. Dr. Sarah Vanessa has very kindly written to the Palace today with an initial response, which wasn't very helpful, but I'm hopeful we can work through it together. So these are the options I think we currently have that potentially allow us to protect our Lord Lieutenant, which is a way for us to protect our county status. You can see how much fun I've had with all of this. And route 4, of course, is something I haven't considered, but I'm hopeful one of you might come up with and tell me this evening that I've obviously missed that was slapping me in the face. So just a reminder in terms of what's looking like our current options. One is join Leicestershire and Giant Donut. Second is join Leicestershire, what I'm calling Leicestershire Local, which is 2 different unitaries in Leicestershire. The status quo or alternative proposal. I'm happy to get to. So in terms of concerns, we've talked about the loss of Sarah County, which I think is a pretty enormous one, is essentially an issue government will. The second one is the process and speed. So as I've touched on, district councils have been ignored, they haven't been given a single chance to have their say. And Rutland County Council's only really been given a say as an add-on to Leicestershire County Council. So this doesn't feel like a choice, it feels like it's being imposed. In terms of the limited engagement, that is why the current proposals at the government is one giant donut, as if that somehow is representative of all of our views, when none of us have been given a chance to have it. The speed at which government is moving is not allowing that space of public discussion. It worries me how many people email me rather than saying we have no idea about this at all until you send an email saying we're holding a public meeting. That should be the way that things are done when they're going to affect all of you more than anyone else, when our bins are collected, how they're collected, what happens and where our lives are working. And in terms of the future, as I said, there's very limited space for that meaningful engagement. So I have major requests from Leicestershire County Council, but I think they should be holding public meetings. They should be going out and putting forward. If they want to propose we move to one unitary model, they should be making that case to everyone. They should be making the case to Rutland as to why we should join Leicestershire and why it be different this time. As I touched on the bigger, better fallacy, there is no proof that it's better. And I've had a great quote from an academic who said, but the search for optimum size of council has proven to be as successful as the search for the philosopher's stone. And as a Harry Potter fan, I particularly enjoyed that quote, so I thought I'd put it in. But essentially, there are no consistent or conclusive results. I've read so many academic studies over the last few weeks, I cannot tell you. That's more medical in-house found, if you have a lot of time to read. But also the cost of restructuring, rebranding, repopulating, ripping the signs out on our roads to say welcome to Rutland, all of this stuff, it adds up. And so most academics have said that supposed advantages of the economies of scale and the bigger, cheaper argument actually are outnumbered by when councils work together across boundaries. So for example, Rutland does outsource some of its areas, not actually as many as everyone thinks they do, but they do outside some, and actually those combined functions are cheaper than reorganisations. In terms of, also the other point I'd make is if it was that much cheaper when you come together, why does it cost government £1 for every pencil when we could go buy a pencil each for 20p in a shop? We all know these things don't always work as they think. In terms of representation of our voice, accountability matters. What is going to be the focus of the new council if it's a giant donut? Will they care about our rural way of life? That's one of the things that I put in my promises to you when I stood to be re-elected, because it does matter. We have a very different life to many people across our country. Remote decision making is a massive problem. So when I was representing Melton still, the fight I had to get the Melton Mowbray Signature Road built, I cannot tell you how painful it was. And that's because Leicestershire County Council didn't have it as a priority and they didn't see it as a major priority, despite the fact people of Melton had promised it for 50 years. And the fight I had to have, and that remoteness was nowhere near as big as what we're looking at potentially moving to. Stanford, the frustrations I hear constantly, they feel they're being milked for Grantham or for Lincoln, they're forgotten, they never get anything. It's true when you look at the figures, they don't get what they should be getting. But also again, if you look at the academics, as soon as you move away from a smaller council, electoral turnout goes lower at councils, people go, oh, well, you know. Public trust goes down, levels of engagement goes down, contact between citizens and councillors go down, identification of affinity with the council goes down, and also the number of councillors, and this doesn't let anybody say it, but the number of councils, well, it does actually, yeah. So the number of councillors elected from just the major parties, so Conservative, Lib Dem, and who am I missing? Labour, goes up. It's fine. But the point is, we have a lot of independents in Rutland. There are a lot of independents across Leicestershire as well. All the statistics show when you move to a bigger model, people just vote for colour because they don't know them, and the issues aren't local. As I said, I've touched on the councillors. The idea that we would go down to 3 councillors only is an extraordinary point. And that takes me to the question of how much was I always listened to last time we were in Leicestershire. There's a reason why we left Leicestershire, and it was a good one. Last one is, not I haven't got the right order, but anyway, equity and fair share. So I touched on the point about less representation. As I said last time around, we didn't get our fair share. We've had the same problem with something called local enterprise partnerships. So we partnered Cambridgeshire and Peterborough one. Then we left there and we joined the Leicestershire one, and we still didn't get our fair share. Then we joined the Lincolnshire one, most of you didn't know we'd be moving around, but essentially these are the organisations that make boosting productivity and prosperity from the economic perception in our areas. The Lincolnshire there published this big glossy document about 3 weeks ago, and they posted it to me. There wasn't one mention of Rutland in the entire document, despite the fact that we pay to be part of the LEP and we contribute funding for projects. All the money goes up to the north. So I think, for me, I have a real question about whether we get equity or fair share. Costs, we've got no idea of costs, but the councils haven't been given any money for this work. So Rutland County Councils, we've got to try and do all this work to work out what is best for us and what to do and how to navigate and what cards you want to hand when you walk into a poker game where the dealer knows exactly what you've got and isn't necessarily on your side. And they're having to do all that in support. And then fair funding. None of this solves the problem of fair funding. The idea that an East Midlands mayoralty is going to get as much money as the West Midlands mayoralty is for birds. The idea that Leicestershire Rutland is suddenly going to get this money unlocked. There is no evidence, there's no formula they've given us, there's nothing they've given us to prove that will happen. So how do we mitigate some of these concerns? Because my goal is always to try and find solutions. So in terms of which model we back, we've obviously got a lot to say about what we do on that. Well, we don't have a lot to say, but we've caused a lot of trouble and tried to. We can put forward an alternative proposal. I think we can work hard to try and protect our own county. I personally, and it was really hard, I was writing this and I was trying to stay neutral, but I got more radicalised every second that I worked on this proposal. I think we need a referendum. If the proposal is really for Rutland to lose its independence, there should be a referendum of our communities. And if the government won't fund it, then I will ask RCC to find the funding for it, because I think it's important. I've worked out the cost of about £52,000, so it is a lot of money, but at the same time it's about our future. We could ask for some more divisions. So we could say, fine, we've got to go with these 2 big Leicestershire, because I don't think we're going to go to one. Then we demand that you have much smaller wards, and then we could end up with 9 councillors rather than just the 6. Again, we just have to fight for it and try and make that argument. And of course, we could also put as a red line that the council must have Rutland in its name. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean it will protect our ceremonial status, but I know I can't tell you how many arguments I get into the NHS, police, Environment Agency, when they write to me as the MP for Rutland to give me an update, and for example the Environment Agency says, here's your update in Northamptonshire and Lincolnshire, and it's got loads of Rutland stuff in it, and I reply going, you do represent Rutland as well, and they go, yeah, but we just don't put it in the name. Well, yeah, I have an issue with that. So in terms of the question of does it have to happen, do we have a choice? There was a lot of excitement after the 21st of January when the House of Commons, the Minister said, the government is not requiring any area to reorganise. All we've done is write out and invite proposals to be submitted. So lots of people across the country, including the local Chronicle and local councils, are ringing me going, oh, Alicia, we misread the paper, wherever it is, the giant, white paper, and maybe it's not being forced to us. But I go back to what the white paper says. And the white paper says, as it says here, the government will do this as quickly as we can, including through legislation where it becomes necessary to ensure progress. A later quote says, we will legislate for a ministerial directive, and that means that we can interfere where areas have not been able to make progress. That to me is very, very clear that they will legislate if we refuse to take part and do as we're asked. And they have said in other interviews that no one council will be able to derail reform, because they are very concerned about that. So if we say we can't agree to devolution until the government reorganisation settle, that does give us some negotiating power, but we're in a very difficult place. I had a long meeting with the Leader of Harbour District Council about this earlier. So some of you may recognise the phrase resistance is futile, and I think a lot of people feel that, but I'm not really one to accept that, as you may have learned so far. So in terms of what next, it could be this Thursday that we hear whether or not local elections have been cancelled, and we'll get told whether we're on pathway to or not, which is essentially one that means that we then have to put forward final proposals by March, what they're calling interim proposals, but essentially, and then final one sorted by the summer. There's also going to be a Rutland County Council full council meeting that you can go to and give your views and speak at. I've asked Leicestershire County Council to publish the letter they sent to government, saying that they wanted us to all sign up to, because I haven't had sight of it, and as an MP, I was not told before this proposal went in that the proposal was for one giant donut. And then obviously my job is to try and keep you informed, and I promise you this is my last slide. So, essentially what I'm looking for this evening is your thoughts on what's been proposed for us. If we were to be subsumed, do you want one giant donut? Am I wrong on that? Do we want two? How do you think it should be best arranged? What do you think the red line should be? What should we be pushing for? Obviously there are red lines and things around things like council numbers, but also around council tax. There's all sorts of different things. Or do you just want us to refuse, do the status quo, fight as hard as we can, refuse, and me to be locally work out some very clever ways to delay as much as I can?